Welcome everyone to our unveiling of our Electric Vehicle North Texas webpage. While you may have noticed, the webpage itself has been updated for a few months, but we've never truly walked people through it and where and what new resources we have. And so we wanted to take the opportunity to be able to walk you through showcasing the different resources we have on the website so you guys can utilize that and share it with others. As well as we wanted to use this opportunity to unveil a brand new mapping resource tool that Cade just developed, and he's going to walk through how you guys can use that. It's really exciting. It's something we've been wanting for quite some time. We think you guys will also be pretty impressed with it and utilize it pretty well. And so we'll be using that kind of walkthrough at the end, where it's more intensive. We'll walk through a couple of examples of the different tools and what the difference is of the existing Power BI tools versus this new mapping tool will be, and all of that. So we do have him walking through that at the end, and then we have a pretty big buffer for Q&A at the end because this is a new tool and we want you guys to be able to utilize it as much as possible. So being able to ask questions directly to the creator and the people that worked on this tool so hard, we wanted to be able to have that not kind of pushed for time. And so we may not take the full 90 minutes if you don't have any questions, but we wanted to make sure we had that time built in just in case. The next page, next slide. So as most of you are aware, I assume by registering for this, we are the Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities Coalition, and that is where our Electric Vehicle North Texas initiative is housed within. Next slide. Over this 90 minutes, we're going to go over very briefly website overview, how it's laid out, and the different kind of categories we have. A different tool and resource walkthrough with a little bit more detail. We're going to go over the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan overview and how that's relevant into all these resources and how you can use them in your planning efforts. And then just some additional website highlights and Q&A. Next slide. So as I said, for those who have visited our website in the last few months, you see it's much prettier, much more extensive than what it had been previously. It always has kind of sat within a one-page kind of breakdown on our DFW Clean Cities webpage, where you just have to keep on scrolling down. And we revamped that so all the electric vehicle resources are linked onto the one singular page where you guys can access that. It's still, as you can see, the same URL housed on the event, housed on the DFW Clean Cities webpage, but you can access this and kind of scroll through, and every page will have an ability to jump to the DFW Clean Cities homepage, or it can jump back to this new Electric Vehicle North Texas homepage. Next slide. And of this, you see here, the top of the page is going to be predominantly focused on these anchors. These anchors are how we've kind of differentiated the different topic areas of the website itself and what different pages and resources we have housed within each. And so EV 101, electric vehicles in Texas, EV types and uses, EV charging, hydrogen fuel cells, incentives and funding, events, and then the Texas EV infrastructure plan. And so that's just the top of the page. And when you click those, like I said, those are anchors. So for those that are familiar with that term, basically you click that and it'll bounce you down to a different place on this same web page. It doesn't bounce you to a different page yet. So we'll go through all of the different kind of homepage anchors and as we go. The next slide. EV 101, this is exactly what you'll see on the page if you click that EV 101 button, or if you just start scrolling down. And so this is a page we really wanted to create for people to be able to use and share with others, to basically know about the basics, know about the just general industry terminology, resources to kind of understand where and how we're coming from. And then the other pages we're able to do a little bit more North Texas, Texas, a little bit more project-based information without having to always kind of go over those basic terminologies. And so for this, if you guys have any stakeholders that are kind of unaware of what the industry is, you can send them to this. It has some nice introductory resources, terminology, mapping tools, things like that. So next slide. And like I said, with this, it gives highlights of definitions, current EVs on the market, fuel types, prices, other zero emission vehicle technology resources, fuel prices, things like that. And so it's just a really good kind of anchor page for those that are trying to learn a little bit more about the industry itself and get more acquainted before you jump into the deeper projects. Next slide. The next part of the webpage is probably going to be the one that you guys are going to be using most of the time. This is the Evs and Texas data section. So this is where all of that data that we develop is going to be housed. So all the EV registration data, some of our case studies, the new mapping tool that we developed, anything in regards to that is going to be on these 2 pages. So like we said before, it is going to be divided in between the Evs and Texas, as well as the regional-based tools, the EV and DFW. And so like we have those 2 Power BI tools, that's how you can see where, if you want to focus on more of that statewide, regional based data, or the more granular regional data, you can click on one of those. Next slide. And with this, like we mentioned, it's going to have those basic registration tools, mapping tools, the downloadable EV registration, as well as just information on, oh, I'm sorry, this is EV types and uses. This is a different slide. EV types and uses. So going back, we're finalizing all the registration is in the EVNT data. The next portion of the homepage is EV types and uses. So think about this as what types of electric vehicles? Is it a fleet-based electric vehicle? Is it a consumer-based electric vehicle? When you're thinking about vehicles themselves, not infrastructure, because that's a different portion of the page. And so when you're thinking about vehicles and vehicle resources, these pages have been developed. The fleet page, I think they are trying to release that. If it's not on the page at this point, I'm not sure. That was sent in to our team to put up yesterday. And so you guys can check on that. That'll be, if it's not up yet, it will be up in the next like 2 or 3 days for some fleet-based resources for EVs. But basically come to these pages, and this is where a lot of that electric vehicle based resources for either fleets or consumers will be housed and put up. And so next slide. The next portion of the homepage is EV charging and infrastructure. And so this is thinking about that infrastructure-based resources, infrastructure and charging-based projects. And so on this, it's separated out, and all of these buttons on the home page will jump you to a new page. And so some of them are the find a charger near you. That's the Afdc charging locator, charger locator, EV corridors, electric vehicle corridor information, workplace charging resources, multifamily housing resources. Building resilient EV infrastructure is a brand new page that we just released this month about some of that. We'll be going over that in the next section where we go over more of the resources. And then the EV Community Readiness, which is a couple of different categories, kind of like housed in a bunch of resources, kind of comprehensively together. Next slide. And then also hydrogen in Texas. And so as people are looking at electric vehicles and zero emission vehicles, we wanted to make sure that they knew that hydrogen is an up and coming technology and things are happening. And so hydrogen is part of that kind of EV 101 definition, terminology information. They can learn about hydrogen, learn about the fueling infrastructure, kind of terminology, what it means, some basic resources. And then this hydrogen in Texas page will go over and be kind of a housing page for different projects and updates of hydrogen in Texas. So our new I-45 plan, just hydrogen fueling hubs, different information based on just hydrogen across the state. Next page. And then incentives and funding. Like always, we're always pushing for different incentives and funding that people can take advantage of. This will jump you to our air quality funding page that we always have that on our entity COG website and that AQ funding website. And so that'll jump you straight to there, where that's where we always post all of our electric vehicle and infrastructure funding opportunities as well. But this is a way that you can jump to that as well if you don't want to go to the COG website. Next slide. And then finally, the events portion of that home page. This will jump you to our DFW Clean Cities events page, where that's where we post, and that's where you registered for this, bump you to that, or it'll bump you to our Drive Electric Week page, which we wanted to highlight. It currently is National Drive Electric Week this week, which is why we are having this specific webinar today. It's along with a fleet-based webinar yesterday, and then tomorrow there's a webinar on how to create a ride and drive. And so if you guys are interested in that, definitely attend that. And then if you're looking to get involved in the in-person event, we're having that on Sunday from 3 to 6 p.m. This year it's going to be at Dallas City Hall. This year also, to differentiate it, there's going to be a medium heavy duty area of it. There will be ride and drives, exhibitors, things like that. And so we do encourage anyone to attend that. We're really excited about that. And so we hope to see you all there on Sunday. You can follow the Drive Electric Week event and register your vehicle if you want your vehicle there, or just register in general so we have a better idea of numbers and can toot our horn a little bit more on how many attendees we have a little easier. And then it's easier to check in and all of that if you have your name registered. But it is free and free to attend. Next slide. And so bringing it all back to that NEVI plan, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure in North Texas, we had big news yesterday on the TxDOT plan was approved through the Federal Highways Administration. And so they're able to start going forward with some of their implementation of the statewide plan. But for kind of a little recap of what the plan is, year one, TxDOT will be installing DC fast chargers along those alternate fuel corridors to make sure that we have a basically filled network of those corridors. And then years 2 to 5, it'll be working with those rural county seats, and then working with MPOs, which is entity COG, to try to identify locations for charging sites. And so the COG region, entity COG region, is allocated approximately $65 million for charging sites within that region. This is not a grant program. You cannot apply for funds. You cannot guarantee you're getting things. So essentially, we are trying to identify and recommend station sites to general siting locations to TxDOT, and then they are going to deal with contractors, and they'll give basically a parameter of like, this is where we want you to figure out where to install a site. So that once that contractor is identified, they'll basically be going to try to find site hosts and all of that. But TxDOT is giving the contractor money, they'll be doing all that. No one has to physically apply for any funds, but we do want as much feedback and interaction with stakeholders to try to identify and recommend those sites as much as possible. And so this is just a map that is one of the TxDOT planning maps that is available on that TxDOT planning site. There is a direct link to the NEVI page, TxDOT NEVI page, located at the top in those anchor buttons on the top of the event homepage for easy access. So we do encourage you guys to check out the plan if you haven't, or check out some of the resources they have on there. Next page. And one of the resources they have on there is siting requests. We've been putting this map in pretty much every presentation we've had for the last 6 months. And so many of you should be familiar with it, but it is the interactive mapping tool. This is where TxDOT and other regions are able to get information and basically public input on different sites and comments. And so if you have on the left, you have the ability to basically insert different sites that you think, okay, here's my, regardless of your city, company, individual, you're like, I think a big gap and I would like a station here because of this. And you can identify that and put that station in there, and then it'll show up. And that's the way that we can have a list, and TxDOT has a list of where people are saying that they want stations, or just different comments in general. And so you can input that. And so we do encourage you, if you have sites in mind, if you have comments that you want to have heard by the state and for us to be able to see, to definitely take advantage of that. Next slide. And so now we want to kind of go over and highlight some of the different tools and all that stuff that we have kind of put on the page, so you can take advantage of these different resources when you're planning for NEVI, how to understand where and what types of sites you should be taking into consideration, how to understand where gaps are, what are the different types of kind of industry factors you should be taking into consideration while looking for all these new stations that are coming about to try to kind of fill those gaps in your jurisdiction. And so Michael will be going over some of the highlights, and then he'll pass it on over to Cade, who will go over those new mapping tools. And so, and like we said, we have a good chunk of time at the end to kind of go over questions, answers, opinions, anything like that in regards to any of the tools or resources that we're going over. So, Michael?
All right. Yeah. So just kind of reiterate, I'm going to go over a lot of the highlights that you guys can use when you're thinking about commenting on the Texas state infrastructure map in regards where you would want chargers in your jurisdiction and locations, along with the highlights that, you know, are just going to benefit you and your community when you are ready to create your own EV charging plan. So Kib, you want to go ahead and head to the next slide. All right, so we're going to talk about EV community readiness. As the demand for electric vehicles increases, it's important that communities instill readiness planning to prepare for the industry shift and infrastructure changes within their jurisdiction. EV Readiness Topics is a broad category consisting of building codes, permitting, resiliency, standardization, environmental justice and equity, and also setting future goals. This section provides various resources that can help your community prepare for both electric vehicles and how to accommodate this transition. Key elements include resources related to EV-ready parking standards and codes, assessing infrastructure needs, such as identifying charging gaps within a boundary, and resources on setting and creating a charging plan for the future to stay consistent with electrical vehicle trends. If you look kind of off to the side, I highlighted a blue circle. That's going to show you exactly where you can find these resources within our webpage. You're going to notice that that's going to be on most of these slides that I talk about. That way, if you do have any questions or you want a more in-depth analysis of this, go ahead and just head over to that section. Kate, if you want to go ahead and hit on the next slide. So this is an EV charger ratio analysis example. It's an example of something that we used with the resources provided in the EV Community Readiness tab. It's all right if it's kind of hard to see, as we're just using this as an example to show you how you can take the resources and data that we provided for you on this website and use it in your own EV planning. In this case, what we did was we took the data from various counties in the region and we were able to identify the amount of level 2 chargers and DC fast chargers needed based on existing chargers and total number of electric vehicles per county. You can use the information provided and data provided to hone in on where or how you want to implement chargers in your own cities. So the reason why we provide these types of resources is to give you the data and the tools to assist you in your planning. So remember to take advantage of these great resources that we've created for you. Next slide. Right. So one of the most important considerations is to allow access to charging sites in low income and disadvantaged communities within your region. The shift in affordable electric vehicles, along with rebates, tax credits, and other incentives have made EVs available for a much larger income range. That's no longer meant for just the richer people that we've kind of seen right now. With that being said, we need to take into consideration that there needs to be equal access to chargers across the entire region, and not just limited to the higher income areas that we kind of see now. Luckily, there are tools and initiatives that close the gap for these chargers. This includes the Justice 40 initiative, in which 40% of federal investments flow directly to disadvantaged communities. And there's also the Argonne National Laboratory that came out with a report in which mapping tools can help identify these underserved communities. One of these mapping tools will be highlighted by Cave in our next section of our presentation as well. Keep equity in mind when you apply for those federal grants too, or when you make suggestions to that Texas planning map to decide where you like chargers in your area. Next slide. So multifamily and workplace charging. So by 2040, EV adoption is expected to encompass over 30% of all vehicles. However, the lack of access to EV charging is one of the top barriers to adoption, especially for those who live in multi-unit dwellings, most of whom don't have the ability to charge their car at home. 18% of all Metroplex residents in the North Central Texas region do live in multifamily units. The need to bridge the gap for access to charging infrastructure is important when a person can't simply just charge in their driveway or charge in their garage. We have created an EV charging accessibility analysis for the North Texas communities to replicate. It's directly on this webpage. I definitely suggest everyone take a look at this when you have time. But other considerations include popularity and amenities. The demand for chargers is going to be there, and people might be persuaded to choose a multifamily site that can meet the demand for charging their vehicles, especially as we see NEVI implemented in the next 5 years. Other strategies can help make this possible, but it overall relates to just having more access to chargers. There are plenty of resources for installing and assessing multifamily unit charging as well. These include previous recorded webinars too that can be accessed with us. And of course, if you have any additional questions, you're more than willing to just email one of us directly. We're more than happy to find those resources for you too. I'm going to shift on over to workplace charging now. So the workplace charging resources provide very similar solutions. Employees who want to charge their vehicles will be able to do so while they are working. Most people work a minimum of 8 hours a day, so it'd be nice to come back to a full battery when you are going home. We have provided resources to help make analyzing the charging needs and installation in the workplace much easier for you. These resources include costs and considerations, employee and employer benefits, and program guides through the U.S. Department of Energy's Federal Energy Management Program, a fee calculator for recouping the cost of EV charging infrastructure, and a sample employee survey is also included within this page. So just keep in mind that, again, we have these resources for you, so please take advantage of them. Next slide. So there are various ways to build resilient EV infrastructure to reduce stress on the grid and peak demand. There are tools listed here that show how to install chargers or software that reduce the impact to the grid directly. There's microgrids, solar integration, mobile charging, energy store options that can be utilized in the event the grid does go down or the peak demand is really high at that time. These are just some of the ways to mitigate impacts to the grid. More information on these topics can be found here under charging and infrastructure. It'll give you more of like a detailed analysis of each of these types of resilient EV infrastructure things that you can implement in your own planning. Next page. All right, so this one is almost a summary of kind of why we're doing this in the first place. So there's 10 counties in North Texas that are in ozone non-attainment by the US EPA. If you're not familiar with what that is, it basically just translates to that there's too much pollution in our region. We have resources to in regard to current ozone activity too, which is the map displayed here, which can be found on our North Texas air quality page. But there's benefits to installing the EV infrastructure to help promote EV adoption. EVs produce no tailpipe emissions while being driven, helping reduce air pollution, including ozone created by nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds that are emitted by every combustion engine that we kind of see here today. So adoption of these vehicles further reduces this ozone. There are some current resources too that provide more information, such as the well to wheels, which compares emissions outputted by various types of alternative fuel vehicles and not just EVs. But I just wanted to highlight that that's, kind of the main goal for us in the transportation division. We directly work in air quality. So any way that we can reduce the amount of pollution and impact on our ozone is something that we're going to focus in on, and EV adoption is definitely a great idea for implementing this stuff. Next slide. So with that being said, those are some of the highlights that we have all found on our webpage. Again, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to email us after the presentation too. I'm more than happy to walk you through it as well if you're looking for a specific resource and you can't find it. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and shift it over to Cdev, and he's going to go over some of the other tools that we have created in order to help with your planning efforts.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name's Cdev. It says Jonathan on the bottom, and like Michael said, I'm kind of going to go over some of the tools that we use within our own organization, as well as some tools that we think y'all could benefit from, as along with collaboration with these resources, so you can get a much more holistic view of the different types of options and how EVs impact the area. So it's just kind of a brief overview of all of the tools we're going to go through. We're going to go over these different tools, but I think something important to keep in mind is that these tools each tackle a different type of problem, and they all go in their own direction to solve these different problems or display these different type of data. So not one of these tools is really the be all end all of great EV registration or any kind of electric vehicle infrastructure. Instead, each of these tools do specialize in their own specific category, and their holistic view is pretty helpful to actually get that final comparison of electric vehicles. So just to kind of start, we're going to go through that North Texas electric vehicle registration tool. It's built by Power BI, and it really specializes in comparing the different types of electric vehicles rather than just all electric vehicles, looking at the models rather than that holistic view. Now we're going to kind of look at the Afdc alternative fuel station locator. This tool specifically focuses on those electric vehicle charging stations and displaying them throughout the region and getting data on how those type of stations are compromised, how they work, the different type of plugs that are within them, and just overall go over how those operate. And then finally, we're going to kind of introduce this final electric vehicle mapping tool that's was really recently created and now distributed to you guys. And this tool kind of go over the geographic spread of electric vehicles rather than digging into what type of electric vehicles or maybe where different stations are. But with that, we're going to change gears just a little bit so I can show y'all a bit of a live demonstration with these tools. Let me make sure I am set up correctly before I go with it. All right, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. So first I'm going to run through the electric vehicle registration tool. I'm going to put the link in chat for y'all to access that tool. So that way y'all can kind of follow along if you'd like. So with this tool, it's been it's a little bit older now for one of our tools. It's about a few years in development, about as old as our electric vehicle registration data in general. But if you follow that link, it takes you to this Evs and Texas webpage. And you can see here, this is the electric vehicle mapping tool, which we'll go over later. But below that tool is our original electric vehicle registration tool. And you can see in this tool, it is a Power BI type of graphical display for the electric vehicles within the state of Texas. And so you can see here at the bottom, I'm actually going to put the tool in full screen mode, so that way it's a little bit easier to see. And so to go over this tool, like I said, this tool really focuses on and specializes in displaying electric vehicle types throughout the region, or not the region, excuse me, but the actual state. And so you can see here in like this graphic, it displays the different EV type by model. And then in this graphic, it displays a different EV type by year. And you can see here, the Tesla Model 3 is currently the #1 electric vehicle within the state. And then the 2022 model is just barely ahead of the 2021 models for the most number of electric vehicles in the state. And while this is very helpful to visualize on a broad level, what this tool is great at is actually looking at specifically where are these electric vehicles registered. So the way it does that is actually an interactivity. So within this tool, you're able to click these different types of graphics to display different results. So for instance, if I was curious about just Tarrant County, I could click on this tool, and it's a little bit hard to see. It automatically updates directly from the electric vehicle registration. So you can see in this EV registration by model year, this automatically updates to only include electric vehicles within Tarrant County. It's a little bit easier to see here in this region graphic. Obviously, Tarrant County is just a small part of the entirety of Dallas-Fort Worth area, but each of these graphics update based on the number of electric vehicles within that specific geography. So if I wanted to change that, maybe I'm curious about, say, Ellis County, those graphics update. So that way I can see, okay, there are 700 EVs within Texas, or excuse me, within Ellis County. And then you can see how these update to show that different type of electric vehicle registration. And so this is really helpful if you're looking at what most people own within the region. So for instance, we had an inquiry the other day about how to get the top 5 models of an EV within one specific county. So you can see within Ellis County, you have the Tesla Model 3, Tesla Model Y, Tesla Model S, the Chevrolet Volt, and the Tesla Model X. So you can get those top 5 really easy in a really quick fashion when using this tool. You can see here, this 2021 has changed, and apparently in Ellis County, 2022 models are still just a little bit over edge of those 2021 models. But you get a lot from this tool by just kind of playing around with it and seeing how these different values change within the scope of this tool. You can see Bexar County, and any county that you may want to actually demonstrate. As well, just to kind of note, we do have the EV percentage of all registered vehicles in the region. This is a stat that doesn't really interact with any others. It interacts somewhat with these tools, but for the most part, it's kind of separated by itself. But it's pretty helpful to look at this tool and see, okay, Austin has the most number of electric vehicles compared to the total number of electric vehicles. And then for in our region, it's a little bit lower at 0.8%, but still second in line with the Austin region. As well with this tool, there are other pages that you can look through to get different type of data. So if you press this next page button on the bottom, it gives you a tabular view of how these electric vehicles are distributed by this page. So zip code, so the different type of zip code, the different type of models. And then at the end, you can see how many of each model within those total within the zip codes. And then the exact same thing with city. It's pretty easy to see, okay, within Dallas, there are 25 Audi A3, 25 Audi A7. So it's a little bit more specialized and you can actually look at your specific area. And then of course we have by county, prospect. And then finally, we have this last page that shows the electric vehicles by city, county, and zip code in a little bit holistic view. So if you want to compare each of the three, maybe one of them in one county and a city in a county, maybe even a zip code. That's a lot of the benefit of this type of tool. Just to note, with these tabular forms of this tool, we do have electric vehicle registration available for download in that same exact format. And it's actually cataloged since September 2021 up to the present. And so you're able to download different types of electric vehicle registration for September 22, August 22, July 22. So you can see the different how EVs have grown over the years and see how maybe they're changing in time. We upload these data sets once every year. Excuse me, I messed that up. Once every month. So you'll be able to see new data sets as time goes on. As well to mention with this tool, we also have our Evs and North Texas page that shows the exact same data, but only for within our region. And it's a pretty similar concept with the normal EVs in Texas, just full Texas page. It shows the number of EVs within our region, those make and models of those vehicles, as well as where those vehicles are for county and the actual city. As well, we also have this technology, whether it's a PHEV or a BEV, a battery electric vehicle, or a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. So you can do something such as, I am curious about Arlington. They'll dynamically update so that way you can see, okay, and of course, Tarrant County, they're in Arlington, but also these this technology tab also updated to show, okay, well, it's 25% versus around 75% when for the whole region, it's about 22% versus 77%. So this is pretty helpful once again with kind of comparing different cities. So in Irving, you got this table updated 27 to 72, and it's pretty helpful to actually see that. As well, within this North Texas tab, we also have our percentage of all registered vehicles by city. So similar to how it was in the Texas by region, but this time it is by city. So if you're curious about, say, Allen, Texas, you're able to see that and actually see, okay, within Allen, Texas, it is 1.72% of total vehicles are electric vehicles. And then here below, we've got another type of graphic that actually shows the EVs per capita by city. And so you're able to look at, okay, in Texas, you can see that out of 1,000 people, there are 40 electric vehicles out of those 1,000. And so it's pretty helpful to see that type of data and get a better holistic view of it. As well, once again, there are these other pages within it. Once again, we have electric vehicles by zip code, electric vehicles by city, by county, and then once again, that holistic view. So it's pretty helpful to look at that type of different data. Now, kind of moving on to the next section, I want to show y'all that Afdc station locator. So let me put this in the chat real quick. This tool is also extremely helpful in that it shows electric vehicle charging stations throughout the region, as well as all alternative fueling stations throughout the region. But for our purposes, I put the little filter on it, so that way it only shows electric vehicle charging stations. And so you can see here, there are these 3 different pages here, this public stations, advanced filters, and fuel corridors. At a broad view, public stations is really helpful if you're trying to find one charging station. So for instance, if I'm in the Arlington area, I can zoom down to Arlington. And then if I am, say, driving on 30 and I need to get a charging station as if my electric vehicle's battery is low, you can click on these different stations and see, okay, the name, obviously the address, directions to get there if you want, as well as a phone number, what type of station it is. So this one's typically level 2. If you go to this one, it's level 2 and DC fast. So it'll show you both of how we want those vehicles displayed. If you click on the more option, it gives you a little bit more info. Pretty similar still, but a little bit broader so you can see a little more. So like for the level 2 stations, it has a J1772 connector. For the DC fast, it has a CHAdeMO and CCS connector. As well as you can see how late it's open, and then the charging network. So it's pretty helpful for that one-off, I want to find electric vehicle charging stations. Where it is more likely to help in our type of work, in any kind of planning, is this advanced filters section. So that loaded pretty quick, actually, so I'm gonna use this. You can filter down the electric vehicle charging stations or any other type of alternative fuel station, and then download that data so that way you can use it yourself, and whether it be a GIS or maybe you're just looking at station to station comparison. So you could do something like filter down the country down to the United States, go down to the different states, and then Texas is close to the bottom. You can then move into, you can see the updates on the side as well. So we went from around 50,000 to just 2,600. Here you can filter by fuel type. So of course we want electric. And then if you want a specific charger type, you can choose that as well. Level 2 and DC fast are usually the most informative. Level 1, there isn't many that are just level 1 in the state. It's more likely that these level 2s have level 1s or vice versa. You can also change the connector type. So if you want just J1772, CCS, or CHAdeMO, or just Tesla, you can select that. As well as with the network, you can go through all these different networks and select which one you want. For now, I'm going to leave it as the all category, just so that way we're able to get a holistic view. And then station, you can determine whether it's public or a private station. This public versus private isn't a whether an electric vehicle can connect to the charger. Instead, rather, it's can the electric vehicle access the charger. So private stations are something that's probably behind a fence, not open to any kind of just random passerby. So private isn't as always helpful, but it's interesting to see where they are within the state. But public is what we're more looking for, that can people access the station at all? Not whether it's can they connect to the charger. And as well, you can see the status of that station, if it's available, if it's planned or temporarily unavailable. This temporary unavailable is also pretty helpful because it adds stations that are eventually going to be back. And so it kind of fits into the actual structure of what electric vehicle stations are within the state. And that's why you can filter it by owner or payment type as well. But once you have this data, you're able to download these results, and it'll give you a entire data set that has all of these stations, or you can even map the results to see those different types. You can see here, these are all the stations that we filtered down to. So of course, it's pretty similar to the first map as with just electric vehicles. But if we wanted to edit the filter, maybe we just want Tesla connectors. That's all we're interested in. We can map those results again. And it's a much more different view of electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the state, and then specifically our region. But then kind of finishing up this tool, I want to move into this fuel corridor section. It's also pretty similar to the advanced filters and public stations, but instead of focusing on just the electric vehicle charging stations, it also focuses on those fuel corridors. So if you go into these fuel corridors, what you're able to see is in the map here, you're able to see the different type of electric vehicle charging stations, as well as these electric vehicle corridors within the state. So you can see, all right, is a corridor ready? Is a corridor pending? And you can plan trips with this pretty well. But you can also see just generally how are fuel corridors within the state. So for instance, if I wanted to plan a trip from this charging station and then ended at this charging station, it'll set that trip for me and let me know whether I'll actually be able to, if I'm far from the highway, if I'm close to the highway, and whether I'll be able to make that trip with the current infrastructure in place. So that's the Afdc station locator. It's pretty helpful for all of the different types of anything electric vehicle charging station or anything alternative fueling station. And so we use this data set a lot in our own work to better understand the total infrastructure of electric vehicles. Now I kind of want to finish up with the new tool that we've developed, the electric vehicle mapping tool. The electric vehicle mapping tool is pretty useful for, like I said, visualizing different types of geographic distribution of electric vehicles, rather than like in the electric vehicle registration tool where you saw just a tabular format of like zip codes, city or counties. And so I've just put that link into the chat so that way y'all can access it yourselves. But it first loads up with this little splash screen is what it's called. And all it does is just welcome you and direct you to the user guide if it is, if this is your first time using it. The user guide we don't yet have up, but we plan to have up by the end of the day. And it's going to go through the same tutorial that I'm going to kind of go through. So if you click OK, you first off see the entirety of electric vehicle registration within the state. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Obviously, you have Texas here, you have the title, you have all these different kind of buttons that you can play. And so it has a lot of functionality within it. For this specific tutorial, I'm actually not going to use the state version of this tool. I'm instead going to use the North Texas version. And you can access the North Texas version by pressing this bottom right button down here. It'll load that data in. I'm going to go to this tab that I've already had loaded just because it takes a little second. But within this North Texas side of the tool, it's actually the exact same as the statewide section of the tool. The biggest difference is that since we are a locally operating organization, we have a lot more data in this tool and a lot more granular. So you'll see stuff like we have our electric vehicle registration down to census tract, block group, so you can get even more granular data rather than just sticking with zip code in the full Texas tool. So just to start by explaining this tool and explaining how it's kind of built out, you can see two primary sections here with this green header looking thing, as well as all these buttons over here. And then this bottom section that contains most of the actual map within the tool. So you can see over here, you have your typical legend with a whole bunch of layers already on. Like I already mentioned, this menu guide here at the bottom right that goes over the user guide, statewide map, and North Texas map, as well as these buttons on the side here that you can press. This home button is so that if you're, say, way over here, not actually within the data, you can hit that button and it'll go straight back to the default map view. And it'll load that data in. These buttons over here, starting with this little magnifying glass, is the search button. So this one is pretty helpful if you want to find just straight up your location within the region. So say if I want to go to Arlington, I can type in that and it'll automatically zoom to Arlington with the search results here. So just backing up back to the home view real quick. Along with that search button, there's also these two other buttons with base map and measure. Base map, all that does is change the background of the map. So you see right now it's that dark view. You can pretty easily change that to something like a light gray canvas. And so if you're having trouble seeing anything, you can kind of play with the results in order to better visualize those. And for now, I am going to change it back, I believe. And then let me actually go to this side. So yeah, once again, that data is loaded in. It has the regular base map in the back. And then finally, this measure tool It's pretty helpful if you want to look at different type of sites, maybe you're looking at distance of something. You're able to use this tool to measure either that distance or possibly even area if you're interested. So like I said, it's pretty good for looking at different type of sites and seeing how far away. So maybe you're curious about from something like this electric corridor. There we go. This electric corridor to this charging station, you can see it's about 5.63 miles. And then if you double click that tool, it'll actually stay within there. So I went a little bit further, but 6.74 miles, you're able to get that different type of area of that tool rather than just a guesstimating by yourself. You can X that out and it leaves you with the final product of the entirety of the map. And so that way it visualizes that data. To move into the actual functionality of this tool is a lot more focused on, rather than just visualization, actually interacting with the data. And that's done with these top tools up here, which does most of the actual fun work with it. So to kind of start off a little bit slow, I want to open up this map layers tool, which has a bunch of different data sets that we have within the tool. And so you can see here, we have electric vehicle charging stations, electric corridors, non-attainment and maintenance areas for EPA criteria pollutants, of course, the NCT cog boundary, environmental justice index, and then electric vehicle registration. And you can turn any of these layers on or off with this layer, or excuse me, with this tool by clicking this little eye icon. So if you don't want something like electric vehicle charging stations, you can pretty easily click that off, and this eye icon will have a stripe through it. Or you could turn on other layers such as these EPA criteria pollutants. And you can see, okay, this is the non-attainment areas for our region, similar to what Michael was saying, with this is all based on air quality, not based on, excuse me, it's primarily based on improving air quality within our region. So turning these back on, like I said, these different layers say a lot about our region. So probably the most unique one is our electric vehicle registration tool. You can see in the back here, it has that actual gradient of electric vehicle registration. And you can see here within the legend, you can tell those different ranges within the data. So if it's white, 0, all the way up to dark red, which is greater than 150. And then within this is actually different data sets of electric vehicle registration you can click. So you can turn off census tract and turn on block group. And sometimes it takes the data a minute to draw, so bear in mind of that. But you can see it got even more granular with the data within it. So you can zoom into different areas, and it will eventually draw the correct geographies for this region. Yeah, so you can see here within these areas, pretty high EV registration compared to this middle section that has lower EV registration. And this is the exact same for all of these different data sets. So of course we have zip code that's we've pushed out before and we've been pretty reliant on, as well as the city EV registration. And just whenever you're playing with these tools, it's pretty helpful to turn on and off these different layers just so you can visualize them. So for instance, zip code's on top, so you can't see city. So you need to turn off zip code to get to city. But if we turn these off and just focus on census tract EV registration again, I'm going to zoom out to the full view. I'm going to collapse that. And now we can kind of move into the other type of tools that we use within this data set. So first I want to introduce the filter data tool. The filter data tool is pretty helpful as another way to visualize the data within the region. So for instance, you have all of these different types of EV registration all the way from city, zip code, census tract, and block group. So kind of starting with census tract, the way you can filter any of these tools is by clicking this little drop-down button. And then you're able to set, okay, electric vehicles that are greater than some number or electric vehicles that are less than some number. So maybe I'm curious about any tract that is greater than 50, really seeing where EV adoption is super present. What you have to do for these filters to work is hit this little icon over here that actually turns on the tool, it'll go into a little green and it'll change the map dynamically throughout wherever you're working. And so you can see within this, much of the region is now dark, except for where electric vehicle registration is pretty heavy. And you're able to see how, where, and how it's spread throughout the region. Maybe we also want to set an upper limit. So we want 50 to say 100 to really dig into where these electric vehicles are registered in specific pockets. And once again, that kind of updates the map. And if we want to go maybe a little broader, we could do something like 50 to 200. Then once again, that dynamically updates the map to only be the most of the 50 to 200 range. If you want to do something where you're looking at where low EV adoption is, maybe you want to get rid of this greater than, and then change this less than to 50. You want places that don't have much EV adoption. So that changes the map quite a bit. And of course, you can go down even lower to say maybe 25. And then it continues to update the map. So that way you're able to actually get a holistic view of where maybe EVs aren't being adopted. And so it's pretty useful throughout all of these different types of filters. Like I've said, we have city, zip code, tract, and block group. For any of these other filters, what you're going to do is the exact same thing. If you want to do maybe 10 to 100 for zip code, you turn it on. But just to make sure that you do actually use this filter, you do have to go back into the map layers filter, drop this down, and then hit that zip code EV registration, turn it on, and then turn off census tracts. So that way you see the different type of filters within the area. That way you can actually see the filter instead of it just being present, but not actually visualizing. And this is the exact same for any of the other filters. So if you go into city and you want ones with less than 500, you can put that in, turn it on, wait for it to dynamically update, and then bam, it'll get rid of those greater than 500. Along with the EV registration filter, we also have our corridor filters. So within the map is electric corridors, and you're able to turn on whether maybe a corridor is corridor ready. Once again, you turn on. Or if a corridor is maybe corridor pending, so you can see where do electric vehicles charging stations need to be and maybe why some people aren't adopting electric vehicles. That kind of wraps up the filter tool. It's pretty helpful at visualizing data, but I want to move into the next tool that actually does a lot more with the data. You can kind of play around with it yourself. This next tool is the query data tool. It's pretty similar to how the filter data tool worked, except the query data tool does not dynamically update the map. Instead, it just grabs data from it and you're able to play around with it yourself. So say, for instance, if I want to do census tract EV registration again, I can go into this and then you can see how it's that similar filter of that greater than and less than tool. And so you're able to set, okay, if I want greater than 10, but less than 50, you can come down here and hit this apply button. It's a little bit hidden due to my taskbar, but it is there. You can hit that apply button in green. And then it brings up all of the census tracts that are greater than 10, but less than 50. You see there are quite a few. It displays at most 100 per page, but you can see that's 752 in total up here. If you want to be even more specific with this, you can clear these results and then you can further dig into whatever you want. But within this tool, you can also define your own area of where you want to download data. So if I get rid of those filters on that tool, zoom into whatever my area of interest is, I can use this query by graphic option. Now what this query by graphic option does is you simply select one of these two types of drawings. So there's either a square or a circle. So you can select different census tracts that you want. Once again, hit that apply button. And it only returns census tracts that are within this little square. And so you can see, all right, there's 127 in total within this square that I selected. If you want to go even deeper within this, you can remove that graphic, again. And then you can even set these lower and upper limits. So that way you can only get maybe within 10 to 50 once again. And it does both type of queries dynamically. So instead of being that 700 or that 100, it's only 54 that are selected within 10 to 50 electric vehicles within this one specific region. And so that's pretty helpful to actually see how within your regions where this data is actually coming from. The way you can visualize this is, since it doesn't dynamically update on the map, you do have these different options up here within this action menu of the results. Whenever you click this action menu, there's these whole bunch of different options, and kind of moving bottom to top, there's this show on map option. And what this does is actually shows you which census tracts you selected. So you can see here, while this one wasn't within the actual confines of the box, since it was selected within the box, it actually selects it as well. So you can see the total of what you're selecting within it. And you can see down here, this census tract is pretty big. It goes all the way up to here. But you can actually see what you want within that data. If you want this off of the map, maybe if you're doing any other queries, you can X out this box. And then down here on the bottom right, you can actually delete those results so it isn't in your map anymore. But to kind of move into the other options, you can actually look at this other actions menu. There's this pan to and zoom to option. They're both pretty similar. They're really, the biggest difference is if I come over here and I lose where I want, I can pan it and it'll automatically change it to the map. If I'm super zoomed out, I want to zoom back into my area of interest, I can hit the zoom to button and it'll move directly back to that. And all of this data is pretty nice, but what is really helpful whenever you do these queries is this export all button. Within this, you're able to export the data as a JSON, CSV, or GeoJSON. For the most part, if you just want to look at this data in Excel, you can hit this export to CSV file. And then that automatically puts it in your downloads folder. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to share it because I'm sharing my browser right now. But if you open this data set, it'll show you all of the census tracts you selected along with the number of electric vehicles that there are. So it's pretty helpful if you want to look at your area of interest and look at specific types of electric vehicle ranges within your area of interest. But kind of going back to all of those different types of queries, once again, it's pretty similar with if you want to do zip codes or your city. If I turn on the zip code layer from over here, go from census tract to zip code, turn that back on, go to query, or I want to look at those zip codes again, I can once again set those ranges, or I can just want to select zip codes within this little area. I can hit that apply button. And then once again, it shows you all of those zip codes. Something to note with any of these EV registration queries is it has these drop downs, but these drop downs don't do anything. These are actually supposed to show the data within the different type of zip codes that you select or any type of EV registration you select. However, due to privacy reasons, we like to kind of hide that as much as possible until you're ready to download that data. So that way you make sure that you want it for within your region and it isn't just out and about in public. So you can once again do the export data option as a CSV. That data is downloaded up here and it'll just come up with a very generic data records download. But once again, you can also show it on the map. And so it's pretty helpful to see what zip codes you're actually selecting. And then once again, you can clear those results with this little trash icon here in the bottom right. Within the query data options, we also finally have this city EV or not finally, but we also have this city EV registration by name option. So what you're able to do, if you're interested in your one specific city, you're able to type into this box the name of your city. So do Arlington and then hit apply here. And then once again, that data does not pop up due to the privacy reason, but you are able to download it yourself. And within that data record is just the one Arlington city. what you can do with that is you're able to see how many are actually within your region and how many are within maybe other regions if you also want to download others. Finally, we have this EV charging stations query. This one is pretty similar to the others, but you can only query by graphic right now. We're working on being able to query by the different types of charging stations, so whether maybe level 2 DC fast or Tesla, something we're still working to build into the web map, but it will come in time. And once again, if I draw onto the graphic, or excuse me, draw onto the map, I'm curious about these charging stations right here. Can hit the apply button down here. And then you're able to see the different type of charging stations. And right now it comes up with this name. For these, you're actually able to look at the data associated with it. So you can see in this first, the city of Arlington, it has 10 DC fast plugs, 2 and 0 level 1. And then these it's actually a Tesla station apparently. And then you can look through any of these. Once again, you can simply put this data on the map by pressing the show on map, and it'll show on different types of charging stations you selected, and then the export all button, which will once again download that data for you. And it's refreshing because I guess I downloaded a little too much, but we can go back to this one. Refresh it really quick. There we go. And then you can see that data downloaded as well. If we click through this once again, it loads up the default view. If you ever feel like there's too much on the screen at once, or you just kind of reset everything, it's good to refresh this every now and again, as it's pretty helpful to make sure that you're staying on track with whatever you may want to be doing. That's most of what the query data option is. Like I said, we're still hoping to add a little bit more as we go over time, but that's most of what our tools are comprised of. These other buttons over here are other options that you have with the map. So this contact us option is if you ever want to reach out to Clean Cities, you can reach out to our email here. Any issues or any problems with the map, you can let me know personally. That way I can make sure it gets fixed, and that way you're actually able to use the map. And then we also have a user feedback form here that you're able to fill out once you maybe played around with the map a few times, and you kind of get a general gist of what you like about the map, maybe what you don't like about the map. Within this other option, we also have a share option. And so I kind of showed it earlier, but didn't talk about it too much. There's an embed option here. So if you go into this Evs and Texas, back all the way here, you can see the exact same map that is actually within this Evs and Texas page. It's in this little square, so we've also added the option to go to the full screen portion of it. So you can click here to do that, and you can theoretically use it here, but generally it's better to use it full screen as it's just a little bit easier, but you can use it here. But with that, you can even embed the map into your own websites. If you play around with the embed options, you're actually able to possibly maybe even zoom it all the way to your community. So say if I were the city of Dallas over here, you can pretty easily just have it where it looks just like this in your embed. And that way, if you do put it maybe in a website, you're not forcing any users to zoom into y'all's community. Instead, it could just be automatically zoomed into there. As well, within this share option, you have create a QR code. You can email it, put it on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, any of that fun stuff if you want to share it around. And then finally, this last layer, or excuse me, this last button is just all of our data and links that we used within the map. So you can download our electric vehicle registration, the Atlas EV Hub VIN decoder, so we actually get our electric vehicle registration, and then all of these other layers that point to where data is sourced from, or where maybe about our organization or anything to do with the web map. But yeah, that is our 3 tools and our new EV charging tool, or excuse me, EV mapping tool. At this time, I kind of want to open up the floor to any questions about any of the presentation or anything at all to do with any of the tools, anything I can help out with, maybe any questions.
Yeah, and so I guess I can just add into this. We do have about approximately 25 minutes to have as buffer if anyone has questions, or if you have like a special instance or thing you want to ask Cade to walk through on the tool, he's able to do that as well. So if anyone has any like, hey, can you show this, how I could do that, like specifically for your example, how I would search, like Kathy, if you want to, like, can you search city of Mesquite, if you guys wanted to do that online here, we're happy to do that. Otherwise, there is the user guide that Cade put together where you guys can walk through and is able to kind of talk through kind of what he just did online, and that is also posted on the website. And so as you guys are playing around these tools after this webinar, feel free to reach out to anyone on our team. They would be happy to kind of walk through any questions so you guys can utilize this as much as possible.
Hey Bailey, it's Kathy. Took me a while to unmute. Jonathan, great presentation, thank you. When's the new website gonna launch? Did I miss that?
It is launched. Everything that we went through
launched?
is live. Yeah. So the tools, the mapping tools Cade just showed, those will be on the same web pages that have the Power BI tools that we normally have the EV registration. It's on those same web pages. So the Texas tool is embedded in the Evs and Texas page, and then the DFW area North Texas tool, the map is embedded with the North Texas page. Yeah, if there's no other additional questions, we could definitely end early. There's no issues with that, but this is recorded. And so just as a reminder, if you guys want to be able to access this, it is going to be on our YouTube page that we put all of our past recordings of events on. And then if you have questions, Gabe, did you go over that there's that ability to submit like comments or questions in the tool? That's still live, right? That ability?
Yes, yeah, you can either use the user feedback form, or if you want, you can email me myself. It's probably the easiest way to do it. Any kind of comments or any problems you're having with it, probably the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, and so you guys can do that, or always just contact that Clean Cities Identity cog, goes to everyone on the team. And so feel free to let us know. We want you guys to be able to utilize all the tools kind of consecutively, simultaneously. They all kind of have different benefits, like Cade did note. The EV registration tool through Power BI, if you guys want to get a better insight on the types of vehicle makes and models that are registered, all those different kind of impacts on that way. That tool is very, very helpful in that regard. And then the mapping tool obviously is that visualization perspective and being able to query out certain visualization sides of the registration data that we've never had the ability to do before. We've always had static maps. And so we hope that that will be a lot easier for you guys in your planning efforts. And then also obviously taking into account the charging station data, where those are, and using them all together to be able to kind of further your direction and get you down the path of those planning efforts as we are getting more money and getting a little bit more insight on different funding aspects that are coming on the market. So yeah, with that, I guess we can kind of close off. We do appreciate everyone for getting on and sitting through, a lot of us just throwing a lot of information at you, but we hope that the new website is helpful, and we are open to new resources and new opinions on things. So beyond just the web map and registration data, if there's any other things you guys feel we could post to better educate or kind of push for different resources, we would be happy to make more individual web pages or expand upon our existing web pages on certain topic areas. But with that, I'll stop the recording, and you guys have a good rest of your day, and we hope to see you all on Sunday at Dallas City Hall. Thank you all.